was my whole goal. Now, that said, I own a house now, and it's mind-boggling to me that I was so short-sighted that I didn't understand, or do research into that. Because if I had done research into that, well, first off, this YouTube channel wouldn't exist and we wouldn't be talking. What's up, everyone? So I hope everyone's doing well today. I hope you're having a great day. Today we have a question from someone whose name I can't pronounce. I'm not even going to try to because I don't want to screw it up. And it said in the, how to win friends and influence people, that one of the worst things you can do is screw up someone's name because it's like their whole identification. So obviously it's, maybe not obviously, but I'm assuming that's a handle. It's not, my apologies. But he says, or she says, questions. How did you get into becoming a Darknet vendor? That's something that I explained a couple times on this channel. If I was to say off the bat, a video that you should check out for that, I would probably say the insane, 3-hour podcast that I had of when I was on the Darknet Diaries. I fully explained that in there. How were you introduced to the Darknet? I was just in technology, and I was in IT and cybersecurity. So for me, it was kind of just by osmosis. It was something that I knew about because I knew about Tor. I understood overlay networks to a certain degree. I'm not like a engineer or, some crazy, awesome Cisco dude or even a network admin, I'm just a nerd who likes computers and technology, I like to be productive, and I find that computers offer a really solid gateway to be able to do those things. Did you ever think about quitting, or did you have a plan to finish at a particular point before you were caught? I did. So I had, arbitrary number set in my head of when I wanted to quit, when I had this, this much money. But how it works with things like, liquidity is when you're running a business, how I did it was when I made a profit, I would take that money and I would put it here, right? And as I'm making money, I'm adding to this pile. Once I got to a certain point, I would go and re-up or, buy more drugs. And the higher you go up in your purchase size, the lower the overall cost is, because you're buying in bulk. So with that said, you have, if you're right, you kind of have this exponential growth rate. But when you get to that point, you might be making 20, 30 grand every 2-3 days, but once it's made, it's instantly gone because you're going to invest and get more product. So, you have this back and forth, and like my number was like, I think it was like 100 or 150 grand, it is like laughable to a lot of people. And yeah, I guess it is, but it wasn't a joke to me. It was, that was my whole goal. Now, that said, I own a house now, and it's mind-boggling to me that I was so short-sighted that I didn't understand, or do research into that. Because if I had done research into that, well, first off, this YouTube channel wouldn't exist and we wouldn't be talking. For a $250,000 house, I might end up putting down, 14 grand, 15 grand with closing costs and everything else if you throw them into the mortgage. So, if I went for a $100,000 house, it would be like half that. So, for what, 6, 7, 8 grand, I would be able to buy that 100,000, 100. And again, I know there's going to be someone, your math's way off. And yeah, no doubt, I don't know the current interest rates. I don't, I'm factoring in closing costs. I'm putting those into the mortgage, so it's going to be way off. But what's crazy is when I was making 20,000 every 2 to 3 days, I could have easily taken that out and went and bought the house. And I just didn't know. I wish I could go back to me and talk to me when I was 20. Because I would say buy that multifamily and rent out the whole thing. And now you're making $2,000 in profit every month. And take that $2,000, save it up, save up the equity. After 2 years, whatever, pull all the equity out of the house and take all the profit that you made and go buy 4 houses. Now you're making $8,000 every month. Again, maybe wait a year, save all that up and go buy another 6 houses. And, you get to a point where after 3 years, now you're in a position where you're making 15, 20 grand, and that's if you just rent it out. And then, it's like, I would be like, listen, like do that. And then, because you're making, let's say at the least $1,000 per month per property, because of multifamilies, go contract a property management company and give them 10% of whatever your profit is every month to pull it in, or do whatever the rent is, but whatever it is to pull it in. And they're going to take care of maintenance, and they're going to make sure you always have tenants. So all you're doing now, no matter how many properties you have, is you're just getting a check every month. You don't have to worry about broken sinks or the heat's not working or whatever it is. None of that matters to you now, and you're just collecting a check. If I had done that when I was 20, I would be a millionaire by now, because I would have just kept going. I would have kept buying houses, So to answer your question, I did have a cutoff. I was just ignorant of how things actually work and the fact that I could have stopped. And I basically had accomplished my goal. I just didn't know. I didn't know that I had, because I didn't really understand what it was I wanted to do. I hadn't gotten to that point yet. It's like if you're climbing up a hill, you're looking up and you see, and you're like, oh, this is the peak right here, right? And then you get up to that peak and you see, oh, there's another peak. And then you get up to that peak and you see there's another one. So like, when you were way down at the bottom, you're like, oh, that's not that far, and you're climbing up consecutively, and because you're dealing with things as they come. If I'm like, well, I have to get this amount of money in order to accomplish this goal, I'm not like, well, let me learn about financing, and let me learn about APR, and let me learn about closing costs, and let me learn about, my return on investment for real estate. Because I'm like, I don't have time to research that, because I'm like, I need to make money. And now I'm putting all my effort and energy into like, okay, well, I've elected this certain way to make money. Now I'm researching that. And I've totally missed that there's a much easier way to do it. And, I didn't have to go about it the way I was going about it. So that said, I know I, way simplified it. And there's going to be a ton of people out there like, hey, listen, man, like, I don't own a house. Like, it's not that easy. And I agree. It is definitely not easy, but I would say that it is possible. Like, I got out of prison, and 2 years after I was out of prison, I had gotten a job, and I'd written a book. I had bought a house. Like, if my dumb ass can do it, anyone out there can. It's like, if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, making sure that it's going to be an asset, something that's generating you money, as opposed to something that's costing you money. And that's the big difference. And for me, like with my place, I have 2 apartments above me, and I rent them out, and that basically pays the mortgage. So I'm not actually making money every month, but I'm saving, what I used to spend in rent, I don't have to spend anymore. So I save that every month. So they say, penny saved is penny earned. And like, so it's like, well, what are you doing now, Sam? Well, saving up for my next place, because that's the hustle now. So, my goal, I'm 38. So, my goal is going to be like, by the time I'm 42, I can retire. I can get to a point where I'm like, okay, I have enough coming in. I don't need to be a multimillionaire. I just want to have enough coming in that I can support myself without having to do a 9 to 5. And then I could do things like YouTube, all day. You do those kind of things that actually interest me, and benefit more than just some psychopathic corporation, which, it's money-seeking entity is what it is. And I can do things like this that benefit a community. It's not a big community. It's a niche community. I think everyone in the community is very interesting, because we're all, in some way, shape, or form, we all have something in common. And that's we like our anonymity, or we like our privacy, or we like technology, or, we just like to nerd out about what's the most hostile, network that you can be in and how to stay safe in it. I think it's an interesting study, if nothing else, because there's not even a major corporation is not going to have as many advanced persistent threats, going against them as like a darknet vendor is. I think the only thing really would be a nation state that might face that many threats. So I hope that answered your question, and I will see you guys in the next video.